This is brutal. There's really no other way to put it. We just got an update on Pierre Engvall, as today was the first day that skaters took the ice in training camp for the New York Islanders, and it turns out Pierre Engvall is injured. Now, this is something that really has not been covered previously. As far as I'm aware, there was no update that Pierre Engvall had undergone an injury at any point either last season or this summer, but we're going to discuss that injury update on this episode of Islanders Digest, as well as two other injury updates, including one to Semyon Varlamov, and that one is definitely more encouraging than this Engvall injury update. And for the record, this is not anything that's going to be hugely detrimental to the Islanders season. I am very aware that Pierre Engvall likely was not going to make the top 12 for this Islanders team. In fact, we're going to talk later in this video on if Pierre Engvall was going to make this roster at all. But when you have $3 million devoted to a player for the next 5 years, the last thing you want is for him to go through a major injury that is only going to make his value even lower. And what really makes this disappointing as an Islander fan is if there was any hope at some team taking a shot at Pierre Engvall on waivers, especially now that the salary cap has gone up, well, that's pretty much done with this news. But we're going to break it down on this episode of Islanders Digest really quickly before we jump into that. Our goal is 2,000 subscribers before the Islanders season begins. Appreciate all your support, and I am so excited to finally cover a game on September 21st. We are finally going to get some more Islanders hockey. It is just a preseason game, but considering the rookies that are likely going to be playing in this game, I am honestly more excited for the Islanders preseason game this Sunday than football. And to be fair, New York football has not been great anyway. But let's focus on Pierre Engvall, and apparently he had hip surgery over the summer and expected to join the group in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Now, the first big question I have when it comes to this hip surgery was, did this happen right away after the season? Because if so, this is definitely a pretty lengthy recovery. Now, it seems pretty standard at this point when it comes to Islanders training camps that we get a surprise injury, and while I hate to say it, you never want to see any player get injured, I will take Pierre Engvall being our surprise injury this year as opposed to last year when we found out that Ilya Sorokin had undergone a back surgery. In addition, speaking of goalies, we got an update that Varlamov is skating. We actually saw a funny clip of him trolling Shannon Hogan as she gave an interview the other day skating around. So he is on the ice, but we don't have any definitive update on when Sorokin is going to return. Varlamov is going to return, and I don't think this is a bad thing. Some people are reading into this saying that there's no definitive time frame and getting a bit alarmed. For me with Varlamov, I think this is a situation where you just have to give him time. There should be no rush for the first game of the season, especially now that you got David Rittich to step in if he needs to play a game or two, especially considering that Ilya Sorokin is going to play the majority of the games anyway. There's no reason not to give Varlamov an extra month if it's going to make sure that he is healthy this time. I do believe for the majority of the season, you're going to need Varlamov to be your backup goalie if this team has any opportunity in being competitive. But one game here or there in the beginning of the season is not the end of the world. And it's just good to see Varlamov back on the ice. And considering that his surgery was a knee surgery, the fact that he is skating is pretty encouraging. Now, the thing with Varlamov is he also deals with those groin injuries. We'll see if there's any update on that. Perhaps this knee surgery will help with that, although I think at this point, that's just an issue that Varlamov is going to have to deal with. Before we dive more into Pierre Engvall and how this makes this contract even worse for the New York Islanders, complete disaster at this point. I'm going to also mention there were reports that Pelech was wearing a full face mask in training camp. It has been confirmed that while he did experience some minor injury, he is completely fine. He is ready to play right now. I will say at this point, it's precautionary here. Pelech should just be wearing this face mask. It feels like Pelech's face is a magnet for pucks. I don't know what it is, but the amount of times he gets hit in the face is well above the average defenseman. In addition, he also takes a lot of checks to the head. I know wearing a face mask isn't going to help that much with that, but really, at this point, I feel like with the amount of games he's missing, he should probably wear that face mask if it's any chance at making it so he's on the ice more often, because I think it's now 3 consecutive seasons where he's only played 60 games. That's going to also have to get better if the Islanders are going to have any chance at being competitive this season, especially now with Noah Dobson gone on the Montreal Canadiens. Pelech is going to have a big role, and the Islanders really cannot afford to be missing him for significant time. Schaefer is going to be a great defenseman, but it is way too early in his career for him to be playing top 4 minutes because Adam Pelech goes down right away. Now, speaking more about Pierre Engvall and why this is just a disaster of a situation, and it's not a big deal in the sense where it's only $3 million, and again, none of us expected him to make this team, right? Or at least I did not expect Pierre Engvall to be in this top 9. Looking at the top 12, sorry, not top 9, of the New York Islanders, I did not see a role for Pierre Engvall. In the wings, he's not better than Drouin. He's not better than Shabanov. He's not better than Lee. He's not better than Palmieri. You can maybe make the argument that he can be more effective than Duclair on a third line role, but that's not a great argument, and there are other players I think that can fill that role better, namely Siplikov or Heineman, who Pierre Engvall is not a better player than, and he's definitely not a better player than Holmstrom. There's no place for Pierre Engvall on this lineup, at least in my opinion. Let me know what you think about Pierre Engvall in the comments below. I know from last season, though, most of the opinions on the channel are pretty low when it comes to Engvall. And not for nothing, when it comes to the press box, who's going to be the extra players for the Islanders? Remember, of all these players, they can only hold on to 3 of them, and this does not include Varlamov. Varlamov is currently on the injured reserve. When he comes up to the Islanders roster, then they will likely send down David Rittich to the AHL. But looking at the press box for the Islanders, they only have 3 spots. Typically, you're going to want to go with 2 forwards and 1 defenseman. Realistically, I am not taking Engvall as one of my 3 forwards. I would take Kyle McLean, Mark Gatcomb, maybe even Liam Foudy. He is a player who I thought was interesting last season. But realistically, Gatcomb and McLean are my 2 forwards. And the defenseman I'm taking is either Ethan Bear or one of the younger defensemen from the system. Likely would not want Isaiah George to be the 7th defenseman. I do want him playing every single night. Point is, there's really no spot for Engvall in this lineup. And my hope going into preseason, honestly, was that he would have a solid preseason and potentially convince a team who's in desperate need of help. Because the Islanders, while they had a really good offseason and they have a really deep forward group, there are a couple teams out there that are really struggling and still looking for depth at this point in time. And I was hoping that Pierre Engvall would have a really strong training camp and maybe trick one of these teams to take a shot on him in waivers. It was not a likely scenario, but I really thought it was possible, especially considering how the majority of Pierre Engvall's 15 points last year, and again, 15 points for $3 million is horrendous value for a winger, especially a winger who you started in your top 9 of forwards. But there was hope, at least some hope, maybe it was just misguided, that some team would be able to pick him up on waivers. But now that he's out for the next 2 to 3 weeks, he's going to basically miss the entire preseason. That scenario is really off the table. I think this also really takes off the table any chance Pierre Engvall had at making the New York Islanders. I think it's pretty clear at this point when he does return from this hip surgery that he will be going to the AHL. And now the new concern is, what is Pierre Engvall going to look like after a hip surgery? We don't know how serious the surgery is. This is the first we've heard of it. I'm hoping that this is a procedure that was perhaps done later in the summer and it's nothing too serious. Again, I wish the best to Pierre Engvall, but this is a player, keep in mind, whose biggest attribute is skating. We talked about this when it came to Matt Barzal, and Matt Barzal has come out and confirmed that he feels 100%. Patrick Waugh says he's skating really as good as he ever has in training camp. With Pierre Engvall, this is a player who is heavily reliant on his skating. Despite the 6'5" frame, he does not really use his body. So if this is going to impact Pierre Engvall's skating at all, he's going to become even less valuable of a player who already has incredibly low value. And unless the Islanders were able to convince some team to take him at some point, he's going to be on the roster or at least in the books, for the next 5 years at $3 million. Now, the Islanders can bury a bit over $1 million by sending him to the AHL, but still, this is an absolutely brutal contract. And while this is not some crazy injury that is going to change the Islanders season, it definitely is making things a little worse. And at the very least, handcuffing Matthew Darche even more when it comes to moving this player. I doubt a team was going to take him on waivers, but the chance was there. At the very least, there was a chance a team would get desperate and maybe take a shot. That's not going to happen. Likely, what's going to happen is Pierre Engvall is going to start in the Bridgeport Islanders for the New York Island for the organization, and hopefully he plays better. Because one thing that really pissed me off about Pierre Engvall last season is when he was sent down to the AHL, he looked like he was not trying at all. The way I would want you to respond when you're sent down to the minors after signing a 7-year extension with an NHL team is I would want you to be hungry and try to prove that you belong in the NHL. Scoring 1 goal in 6 games in the AHL really was not impressive. And you also have to wonder at this point, now that we know Pierre Engvall did have a surgery, was this impacting him throughout the season last year? Gonna be honest, I really don't think it was the case because this issue of his inconsistent play has been there for multiple years. And more importantly, when it comes to Pierre Engvall, I think there was a play towards the end of the season where he kind of fell awkwardly. I wonder if that was where he got injured. It did not look like he was playing injured all season long. I could be wrong. If something comes out and we learn more about the situation, I'll admit I was wrong, but I don't think this is a situation where Pierre Engvall was playing injured. Let me know what you think about Pierre Engvall. I have a pretty good feeling I know what you guys think of Pierre Engvall. Do you think he has any shot at playing games for the Islanders this season? I'd go as far to say I don't think, even if there are multiple injuries to the forward core, I don't think we're going to see Pierre Engvall on the Islanders this season. We know just how much Patrick Waugh doesn't seem to like him, but I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm your host, Patrick Nilan. Catch you on the next episode of Islanders Digest. Let's go, Islanders.